Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Very shortly, I've got tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But first, West Yorkshire Police are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on diversity staff and training. A Freedom of Information request has revealed that the force's total diversity, equity and inclusion staff bill comes to an astonishing £970,000. That includes a head of diversity, equality and inclusion who earns more than £91,000 a year and a positive action sergeant who's paid 80 grand. And once you factor in the 300 grand that the force also spends on diversity and equality training, well, that total is well over £1 million. West Yorkshire has seen some of the worst cases of Pakistani rape gangs, for what it's worth, with an investigation back in 2016 concluding that the force and social services were guilty of, quote, a serious systematic failure to safeguard a vulnerable girl who was groomed and raped by at least 13 men. Well, I'm joined now by the former Detective Chief Inspector Dave McKelvey. Dave, thank you very much. It's great to have you on the show. Do you think this might come across as a bit of a slap in the face for a lot of people around the West Yorkshire area who might be forgiven for thinking that maybe diversity is not their greatest strength?
No, I totally agree. There's 2.1 million people in West Yorkshire who expect their police force to be policing burglary, robbery, sex crimes. This is a huge amount of money, £1.3 million, 18 people internally, 8 externally working on EDI. Meanwhile, you've got burglary, robberies, twice the national average in West Yorkshire, and over 40% of crimes of violence and sex crime in West Yorkshire. So it's a huge amount of money. I'm not expecting you to actually know the answer to this, by the way, but what is a positive action officer? What is that? Do you know what? I had no idea. I mean, we had all this in my day, and I remember going to these meetings, and I used to come away completely bemused by what I'd heard. The Met's going through the same thing again now. They've got this new 3-day course for every single Metropolitan Police officer, new Met for London, that's again going to go through this whole diversity training issue. When the police are failing, to attend burglaries, failing to attend other crimes, clear-up rates are down, they can't recruit staff, they can't retain staff, you would hope that their focus would be on actually policing the streets and getting policemen back on the streets of London or back on the streets of this country.
I just think for a police force that at times, unfortunately, had to admit that actually it had not necessarily always investigated serious offences because it didn't want to stoke racial tensions. I think to come out and for the local mayor, who I get is not part of the police force, to say diversity is our strength, to then have things like, a head of diversity, equality and inclusion on more than £91,000 a year, and this procession of people whose singular job it appears to be to really try and, and I would argue maybe appease certain communities. I do find that a bit of a slap in the face to the reality, really. I mean, does this actually just epitomise where we are, where the fear of being called racist actually trumps maybe solving crimes?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this whole issue has been going on for many, many, many years, and you would have hoped by now that the police service could have resolved these issues. And yet, it's still going on now. They're still raising it as issues. The point of the police is to solve crime. To make people feel safe, and that's what people expect. The public expect that, and unfortunately, you've got politicians and you've got senior police leaders who seem to have a completely different opinion to the public.
You mentioned when your time in the Met, I believe it was, but former Detective Chief Inspector, you must have seen how things change. Would you just enlighten our viewers and listeners really on how you saw things change over the years for you as a police officer?
Yeah, well, my focus was always on catching criminals. It was about catching burglars, keeping people safe, people who broke into people's houses, rapists. Our focus was totally on making sure the public was safe. And there's been a slow erosion of that. If you look at just, West Yorkshire, their clear-up rate for burglary and robbery is about 6%. It's pretty appalling. So it really needs a focus back on what matters. And what matters is the public want to see policemen on the streets. They don't want to listen to all this EDI garbage. They want to see policemen doing what policemen do.
Well, Dave, look, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. You take care, mate. It's Dave McKelvey, there's a former Detective Chief Inspector.